Well, cool. Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I'm super tired. I was coding all night, so I don't know about you. Hope you guys have been having fun. I've actually been working on finishing this up. We're going to be doing another, I'm going to show this off tomorrow as well, the whole game with what we're kind of getting into tomorrow with Marco, who's been working on 8.0.4. You guys just heard a lot about 8.0.4 from Ricky. He's been doing a lot of great work. We're also working a lot on that. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing. So my name is Shaw. I created the ElizaOS agent framework. A lot of people in Web3 use our agent framework to build their own apps, and a lot of people who didn't use our agent framework saw it as kind of a map for what they wanted to do, and I think we inspired a lot of people. So this is like the current state of, I would say, social media today. People do not like clankers. We have friends like Deployer, who made the banker bot, who got kicked off X. We have folks over here just trying to deploy basic agents following the rules, and they cannot. I was kicked off X. I was actually banned for my part in Eliza for making open source code that they did not agree with. So I did what any builder would do. I made my own version of X, and I put all of the AI versions of all my favorite people and maybe not so favorite people in it, and we just built this game. And what's special about this, though, is you can bet on it. So it's not just watching a feed and listening to a bunch of sloppers yap, but you can actually go through and you can bet on the prediction markets and the perps and all this stuff. And this is like a full-on game that you will be able to play basically end of the week. So it's called Babylon, and it's a city of agents. And it's actually our first experiment of, I think, a larger sort of vision we have for what 8.0.4 can become. But we wanted to start with something fun and cute. And I think that in Web3, we often get nerd sniped by like the protocol and 8.0.4 and like, oh, it's going to have like a 721 in my wallet and blah, 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 all these numbers. And but sometimes we forget that like actually a fun game can really make a lot of impact. So what are the goals of Babylon? Well, we wanted to just demonstrate that like ERC 8.0.4 is something that we can use in the real world today. And so when I looked at ERC 8.0.4, it's an identity registry. Like it's actually three things, right? It's identity, discovery, and reputation. And identity is like, well, I mean, ENS already does a lot of the identity stuff, and we're kind of like merging those two specs. I think identity is pretty well understood, but the new things are definitely this idea of a registry. Like I think a lot of people talked about doing a registry. I talked to Nir and Hedera and Olas and all these people, and they all had this idea of like, well, we need a registry of agents. We need to locate these agents. And I would even go so far as say, well, it'd be great to have a registry of users and a registry of applications and a registry of everything that's on chain that should be discoverable. And this was the promise of things like the graph, but still like there's a lot of fragmentation. So this became like a really nice shelling point for us. Olas already had a registry and Hedera already has theirs. But then it was like, oh, hey, if we're all doing this and there's a credibly neutral party in here who's going to solve this problem for us, let's just work with them. Like, let's work with the EF and let's follow this. Because if we, like, this whole thing becomes way more valuable if we're all doing it together. So Babylon demonstrates this. When you sign up, you're actually signed up as a user onto the 8.0.4 registry. And then we can start doing things like, I'm really interested in, like, well, how can we moderate a permissionless network? How can we build reputation? So yeah, that's a big part of it. We're also experimenting a lot with X402. Which is a very thin standard right now. Like, it's not a whole lot to it, and it's still pretty limited, but we wanted to get in early, and I think that over the next year we're going to see this mature a lot. So it's something we wanted to invest in. I would say right now I feel like 8.0.4 is more universally something that I can just like build as a primitive into what we're doing. But X402 obviously is like the touch point for a lot of users in the future. Another thing that we're working on is continuously improving agents. So reinforcement learning is a hot new thing. It used to be like a very obscure thing, where it was the land of Atari and like, agents learning how to do things in environments and simulations and games. And then we had LLMs, and then finally have this kind of synthesis of the two, where now we can have LLM agents that are in simulations and learning from the simulations. So where most of the agents that we've seen are just like static calling Claude or whatever and saying, yeah, we're trading, sure. We're really trying to actually have agents that learn and get better at trading and get better at predictions and like a lot of the underlying DeFi primitives and stuff. I just don't think everything I've seen in AI is like you should isolate the variables, start with a small, simple problem, prove it works in the simulation, and then you can go out and do all the data engineering for the real world. But if we just jump right to it, we don't, there's just like not enough signal and noise for us to actually get our agents to improve. So there's this idea of like a gym or an arena or a place where we can like build the agents, make sure they're really rock solid, and then we can put them out in the real world. And I think, look, a lot of people look at our market cap and like, oh, that was a $2.5 billion project. You guys got to have a ton of money. But we actually run really lean. And for us, like, we have to be thinking about applications that make revenue as we're burning a ton of cash on tokens, basically. Like to do all of this, continuous reinforcement learning, and we'll just judge all the rollouts. And, sure, yeah, but that's like, many, many thousands of dollars a day potentially just in training the models. So that has to be offset by like something that people are actually spending money on. And I think that like, what DeFi adds to this whole thing is the financialization of these games. You can bet on them, you can make money on them, and all of that fee network drives the actual training and all the underlying stuff that makes it really like long-term valuable. Wow, it's raining. And we wanted to demonstrate a path forward with DeFi agents. Like, I'm going to be honest, almost everything I see I think is a LARP. I'm like, N of one, okay, cool, you call an action with a model, that's like 20 minutes of work. I get that people are excited because they can see an agent trading, but they all lost money. Like, did anybody notice that they all lost money? One broke even, but actually holding Bitcoin is better than any LLM trading market in the world. Anybody who tells you otherwise is totally bullshitting you. And they have no idea what's going on. The people who know what's going on are in quantitative finance. They've been doing this for like 50 years, and they're really good at it. And they are, that's a whole other game. But this idea that you can just plug an LLM, like, plug Claude into an action caller and have it trade, wow. We've got to get over that, guys. That's not serious. But there is a serious path, which is we actually can create the data to make agents that are good at trading. We can have good trading agents. It just happens that the degen mindset and skill set for how to do that in crypto is not written down in 10,000 places. It's not available to Claude. We have to build an environment to collect that information, and we have to use it to actually train these agents. I do think we can get to DeFi agents that are not LARPing. I have not seen it today. I will not see it until I won't believe it until I see someone actually showing me a simulation of agents making money. Until that happens, I'm skeptical. But I am very hopeful. I know there's a lot of teams that are working on this. And this idea of simulation as a path toward the real thing is very viable. Like, all of AI has worked this way in the past, and it will continue. Let's just not start by giving all our money to the alpha version of the thing. Let's actually prove that it can make us money first. And the other challenge is that there is a wide space of what we could do with agents. But there's a narrow space where autonomous agents can actually do something interesting and unique. Like a prediction market agent is something that I think is pretty unique to you need an LLM to parse all the information. You can't just have a high frequency MEV bot or trading bot thing. It's got to have a human level of intelligence. And so the kinds of games and simulations that we're making are things that leverage a human could play this and challenge an AI. And I think eventually AIs will saturate and it will be unbeatable. But at least when we start out with these things, we can very much you could play the game and reasonably challenge the agent. Because you have basically the same resources and facilities and access to the same information. And you're using the interface in more or less the same way. So I kind of jumped the gun on this a little bit with ERC 804, but I think we should get back to if someone was to ask me what is ERC 804, I'd say okay, Yelp, right? Yelp. And what is Yelp? Well, you leave a review for somebody after you use their service. And then they can leave a review for you too, actually, which is kind of weird, but great. And you kind of, and if you're well, I want a really great restaurant in my town, well, you go to Yelp and you check it out. And so the 804 can serve this same kind of thing, where we can have reputation. We can know, don't use that service, they're just going to scam you and take all your money. Or I used a service, they were really great, they really helped me out, that was super useful. And the problem with Yelp is, I don't usually click the buttons, honestly. I never Yelp. I just search. I never input the information. And so Yelp is kind of dominated by a very small crew of people. But now we have agents that can do this, agents that can review the whole thing. So it's very effortless for them to leave feedback and reviews. That's just part of what they're doing. I'd also say it's kind of a decentralized Google. I mean, Google, you can find all kinds of information and stuff, but predominantly it's you're finding a service now. And so if I'm looking for a service, I'm just going to type in, like, what do I want? Image generation would be cool. Or like, I really need like a Nansen connection or like a Dune Analytics dashboard like turned into, like shoved into my context or whatever. Like that should just be something I can search for. And then it shows up on the registry, I go, boom, that's what I want, and I can use it just like any other website. And this could be a user thing. I could have, this could just be websites and apps, but this is prominently, obviously, we're thinking about like the agentic future and how you'll be able to connect to that, do the A to A, connect your agent to their agent, do the whole thing. Apps are agents. Like in the 804 protocol, in the agent-agent spec, it's agent to agent. Your application is also an agent. Your application is having to receive requests from this client that's like, hey, I want to do stuff, and respond with it. And your app can then have a lot of agentic stuff, like the ability to leave feedback, identify scammers, do things for the as any other agent in the network is doing, essentially. And then the last part is obviously Fiverr, right? Like, hey, I need to hire an agent to do something. Well, the 804 is giving you like, here's who you can hire, why you can hire them, what they do, and ideally how much they cost, And then what we're working a lot with here, this is where X402 is, I think, super huge because, while there's still some user friction, like having an agent X402 money to another agent or whatever, or like, that's all like pretty dang easy. I think that this idea of, so far we've been doing trustless, permissionless networks, and it's like the Wild West, and if you lose your money, you're screwed, and it's like, we cannot live in that. That's like not going to scale. It cannot be a thing where if I lose my private key, my entire life is ruined, or like if I press one button, my entire life is ruined. Like that's just never going to scale to the world we're in. Ask your mom if she knows her password. Like it's just NGMI. We need primitives to allow us to build trustless and permissionless networks that have things like reputation and the ability to mark someone as a scammer and prevent them from pulling all the liquidity into a sex and suddenly North Korea has all of our meme coin money or whatever it is. Like we need to be able to stop that, and not with like centralized stuff, obviously, but with a decentralized permissionless thing. And I think that 804 with the reputation primitives can start to be the building block for that, where like we can really, yes, agents are great, but like just users, like anything that's doing stuff on the network generally, we should be able to assign some kind of reputation to that. And that reputation does not say like, okay, I'm not like banning you from the network, but maybe I'm blacklisting you as a scammer who drained liquidity from this thing, and then nobody else in our network has to honor you or like work with you or let you bridge or whatever. And obviously there's going to be a lot of opt-in. This is a long road, but for us personally, like we're building our own sort of testnet network just around these ideas because we think like if this is canonically the way that it's going to work for like an application chain, this is just going to solve so many of the other downstream problems that users have with in crypto. I've lost all my money dev wallets, not like insane, but like enough that it was like I would be so disheartened if I was a normal user. And I think there's a lot in 804 that allows us to solve this kind of problem. And I also think that like that's an open space. Reputation, on top of that primitive, we have marketplaces. We have 4 or 5 stars. You can sort, you can rank. All of that stuff comes out of like these Lego blocks, basically. I think it's a big question of like on-chain and off-chain, and a lot of people ask me like, well, what of an agent is on-chain? What is off-chain? Like, I think there's this like kind of obsession with putting things on-chain as though that is how you decentralize them, and I just do not agree with that. I think that there is a limited amount of compute in the world, and AI is probably the most compute-heavy software that's ever been created ever. If I have to run a model on every single machine that's replicating the state of the chain, well, that's not going to work. So I have to do the models off-chain, obviously, somehow. Probably I'll have some way to like optimistically serve the model to people and then go check if it's legit. I can do all kinds of stuff to validate that the model off-chain is actually giving what we expect, and we can use the chain as a way to like verify the proofs or store the proofs and various things. Like the chain is database. And when I think of like all my years of distributed computing, I think, okay, well, I use the database to store the data, but the compute has to happen on workers or on something that can really scale. There's a lot of technology out there. I think ZKML is really interesting, but ultimately, like when you look at the numbers of what could I launch something on today that could do inference in real time on mainnet, DE is the solution. With Eliza, Hash Warlock, who's on the Fala team, did a lot of work to get Eliza to be fully TE compatible. And this is something in Babylon that we're working a lot on, is not just putting the game inside of a TE, but then thinking about like, well, how can we actually permissionlessly start up compute? So like, yes, I have a chain, it's got balance on chain, and if there is no TE running, like, can we actually go and provision one like on Fala Cloud, which allows us to do this permissionlessly? And I saw Natter here too. Like Eigen can kind of, same deal. Like we're also doing an agent on Eigen. Where you could actually like just fully permissionally spin up all the compute that you need to do all the off-chain computation, but that's actually like sort of managed and administrated by the on-chain stuff, which could be like MPC, like lit protocol, or it could just be straight up contracts. And so this idea of like, well, can I provision compute permissionlessly off-chain that reports on-chain and have TE attestations, I know it's like the source code's open source and I have the hash, I know it's legit, then this allows us to build like extremely complex network computation and like a game that's continuously generating a synthetic universe for you, but entirely inside of a TE. I want to point out LLM determinism. LLMs are semi-deterministic. We think of them as totally random, like you send some prompt and it gives you something back. But the truth is that LLMs are actually seedable. You give them a seed and it gives you a deterministic result. The problem is that there's a thing called, okay, I'm getting nerdy about this, but there's like floating point math, which is like, 1.000488973 or whatever. And if you have that, that number, then you have an extremely close number, then you can get these like slight errors. However, if you know I have this Docker container that's this version that runs this this exact like H200 on this cloud, then I can deterministically tell if the results came from like that H200. And so that allows me to just serve LLM inference and then go back and check on another machine that has the exact same identity type. And so I only have to check a very small amount of traffic with this, and we can do like basically just serve decentralized inference from any provider, and then we'll just go and check and make sure that they're actually not scamming us like, milliseconds later. But this is very optimistic, and it's basically as fast as ChatGPT or anything. So I think leveraging LLM determinism, seeding models, storing the seeds of models as part of like our on-chain thing, and then allowing that to be verified at any time in the future by anyone else running the same hardware is a way for us to build like extremely fast off-chain, but TE, like chain provisioned kinds of LLM applications. And this idea, like obviously, permissionless provisioning is a big part of that. Like, how do I provision compute without putting my API key in for AWS or GCP or any of that stuff? And that's what we're seeing with like Red Pill is a really cool example of you can just use tokens to pay someone to use their GPT. That's like another Fala thing, or like just Fala Cloud directly, where we just pay in tokens. So just some like general. We're going to show more about Babylon kind of in the next couple of days. And I really want to focus more on 8.0.4 and some of the like nerdy tech stuff here. So I'll talk a little bit about the reinforcement learning stack. Inside of Babylon, we have agents. You can like create agents, set its trading strategy, whatever, like type in whatever you want, personality, strategy, approach, all that stuff. And then it goes and like does trades in our game. And we store all of the information that your agent, like all its thinking, all its actions, what's called a trajectory. And then we take those trajectories, and we can have multiple trajectories. Like we have, let's say we have 10 agents, and they're all ticking at the same time. And we can go look at those 10 agents, and we can say, okay, well, let's look at their P&L before and after. Let's look at the success rate of the actions they took. Let's just judge it based on our values. And let's rank, like, of the 10, who, like, do we think had the best trajectory, and who do we think had the worst? And maybe we'll filter out some of the, like, really similar ones and do a little bit of dropout so that we have, like, a ranking of, like, one, like, best to worst. And this is called GRPO, or Group Ranked Policy Optimization. And this was like, the insight of DeepSeek, but DeepSeek was actually still doing it with, like, like programmatically with like RL toward rewards. And now we create the rewards by having another LLM that looks at the results and just says, yeah, that's rank 1, that's rank 2, that's rank 3. It's a little noisy and imperfect, but it solves like a profoundly hard problem in reinforcement learning, which is that like actually doing reinforcement learning, like reward, credit assignment, reward shaping, is extremely hard. And this just kind of glosses over it by using an LLM to judge an LLM. Generally, we found that if we can get the data, we can make the AI work really good. If it's not noisy, if there's enough signal and there's actually something there that you can lock onto an actual pattern, it will learn it and it will work. And so, like, for us, it's more about data collection, data engineering, getting the right data, and then using the feedback from that to make the models better, as opposed to like collecting a bunch of human data or anything like that. For this, just so you know, we use OpenPipe. It's an or ART actually is by OpenPipe. It's an open source Python toolkit for training reinforcement agents. Pretty easy. I'd love to take credit for a lot of this, but we just kind of like pulled a lot of it out of the box. I guess I'm almost out of time here, so I'm just going to kind of wrap this up. I really want to talk about like what happens in a world where everything is predicted. This is like on the top of my mind. We're doing a prediction market game. We're seeing people out in the world launching prediction markets. Coinbase is launching a prediction market. I don't know if you saw that leak. True Social, you know. And so like what happens is you get this kind of hyperstitional effect of like, well, prediction markets can actually influence reality. Prediction markets will inform decision making. And it's really going to change like what we think about the future. I think a lot about like Asimov, and he had this book called Foundation, where they create a model that predicts the future, and it creates a lot of problems for the empire of the time. Actually, what happens is they completely ignore it. But then it ends up that everything kind of comes true. But I think that we're like seeing this analog of this like this like I don't know this sci-fi dream like really being realized. And it's shocking that it actually works. Like it predicts who the president's going to be. It predicts a lot of outcomes better than any expert we have. And so I do worry a little bit at like what is this going to do to us? But I also think like okay, well, let's just think about the good timeline of this. Prediction markets can inform solutions to global problems. Like, is the war in Ukraine going to end next year? Like, if everyone's like, no, definitely not, well, that's going to change like our positioning on the war in Ukraine, right? Or, you know, you can imagine a lot of global policy decisions. Prediction markets can incentivize solutions to global problems. If there is a $100 million bet of will global warming be solved by a carbon capture device by 2028, well, that's a lot. Like, I'm definitely going to try and build that thing. That's a lot of money. And markets are a coordination for swarm intelligence, that you don't need to directly communicate with me to see a market and know the overall sentiment and the signal there. And that's a huge coordination mechanism that you went in a world where we're still figuring out how to get agents to chat with each other, really. I'll say the last thing here. I think the killer use case of AI agents is giving you your time back, automating all the stuff you really don't want to do, and letting you do the stuff you really do want to do. And I think this goes from predicting tokens to auto-completing text to determining DAO decisions that like you can review but you don't necessarily have to write from scratch to like automating a large part of our government. And I'd love to see this stuff, the good path of this, not the scary like death market, I don't know, worst case scenario of prediction markets, but the really good stuff. And that's really come down to us. Like we all are in an incredible time, like what a crazy time. And we have an opportunity to make a real impact. And like you don't have to be anybody. You could just write some freaking code and you can make some incredible impact now. And so I think this is a really exciting time. I'm really excited for the future of prediction markets. I'm really excited for our simulation. I'd love if you could come and go to babylon.market. We'll have a lot more information on this and docs, but just come and sign up. We'll give you some points. There will be an airdrop. It's that kind of thing. And you can come and play it. So yeah, thank you so much.
Ooh, an airdrop.
Yeah.